It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the stage State Senator Paul Newton. Senator Newton represents District 36 in Raleigh and is currently serving his second term in the North Carolina General Assembly. Senator Newton, good morning. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to welcome Congressman Ralph Norman, who is serving his second term in the House of Representatives. Mr. Norman represents South Carolina's 5th Congressional District and includes some of the suburbs closest to Charlotte. Congressman, a pleasure to have you. Joining them on stage is Reid Wilson. Reid is the Hill's national correspondent. Reid, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for hosting us in Charlotte here, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you, too, for being here as well. We got the perspective from the city of Charlotte just now, and the thing that I find most fascinating about the affordable housing crisis is that this is a multi-government, multifaceted issue. And it hits not just cities, but also suburban areas like Rock Hill and more rural areas around the country, too. So I just wanted to start with that sort of interplay. What is the affordable housing crisis, the housing affordability crisis, doing in a place like Rock Hill?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come today in Charlotte. I will tell you, the roads getting to Charlotte were long and time-consuming. But no, the affordable crisis is hitting every part of the country. It's going to get worse for North Carolina and South Carolina. California lost $8 billion in revenue from taxpayers fleeing California. Where are they coming? North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And we're the beneficiaries of that. But now when you talk about affordable housing, and by the way, my background, I started digging footings when we were young. We built housing forever. We're now in a commercial real estate business, more so than housing. But how do you build an affordable house? I would get a different answer for each one of you, what is this, 80 people? Because affordability is what you can afford, and it varies. It's less for some and more from the other. And so how do you solve the affordability crisis? One, Charlotte's done a good job on the move to work here, where you get people off the welfare rolls into work. Secondly, the way that you have affordability is give people great jobs. I tell businesses everywhere, go into the technical colleges and tell these students and tell the high school students who are getting ready to go to school the money you can make in framing houses, brickwork. The dollars that are available, they don't understand or don't realize. 4 years education, folks, is not for everybody. But the technical schools will offer a good framework for those to get the job, to have the money, learn a skill, and then put it to work. The mayor and Congressman Alma talked about the opportunity zones. That's the greatest thing that's happened in this country. 132 in South Carolina, 252 in Charlotte. And the way that works, it gives incentives as a developer, the private sector, to buy land. You hold it for 5 years, your capital gains is half. You hold it for 10 years, your capital gains is zero. No government involvement. It's the businesses that come in and put equity to build and they go in low-income areas, which is a great thing. So it's incentivizing the private sector. I have a little different view than others about more grants and more government assistance. It has a role, but folks, we've got a big job to do in getting this country out of national debt. I'm not adding to $22 trillion. I wasn't sent there to do that. So for every grant, what are we cutting to save you, the taxpayers, in the future? I'll shut up and let the senator.
Yeah, Senator Newton, so tell us about the perspective from a city like Concord.
Sure. So when I'm not in Raleigh, I live on a 260-acre farm in Mount Pleasant, which is Cabarrus County. A little bit of it is a small wedding venue that my wife runs. The other little piece is where I live. But the rest is a farm. And one of my joys is to take care of any long grass that the farmer hadn't taken care of, and I do that on what's called a ZTR mower. A zero turn radius is the acronym. I'm going to borrow that acronym to answer your question. So Z stands, in my mind, for zoning and land use regulation. every academic paper that looks at the root cause of our housing affordability problem points to zoning and land use regulation. About 25%, somewhere between 25 and it can even go as high as 50 or 60%, I believe, in some cities, is around the regulations imposed on builders. Is it the be-all and end-all? No. But if it's not the root cause, it's the predominant root cause. Now, you heard from the previous panel of speakers, there are a number of contributing causes to the affordability issue, but if you look for a primary root cause and therefore work from there for a solution, you look at regulatory burden. It adds cost, and you talk about density issues, minimum lot sizes. It's a root cause, if not the root cause, of the problem. The T stands for transportation. So one of the ways I think we need to think about this, Los Angeles has done this, is they've looked to relieve zoning burden around transportation corridors. And so they are encouraging building along the transportation corridors. You know, city planners have for decades now told us everybody has to be at the city core. Everybody's got to be in uptown to be close to their job. I mean, for the better part of 25 years, I commuted from Cabarrus County into the heart of Charlotte because why? Because housing was more affordable in Cabarrus County. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, you say, well, what about our environmental goals? Well, if you are smart about the transportation solution to affordable housing, then you can, I think, tackle both. You can solve the environmental concerns you have about commuting, the congestion concerns you have about commuting, if you're smart about transportation. So I think there are affordable housing options that are not in the core of uptown Charlotte. So we can't forget about that. So we need to think creatively about transportation as a solution. And then finally, the R for ZTR is rural. So for years, we've stood by and been content with now, I think there are 17 or 18 counties in North Carolina that are actually losing population. And we've been sort of nonplussed by that because the urban core is where the action is, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but the rural part of North Carolina, losing jobs, losing employment opportunities, perhaps there's a solution there. Perhaps we need to change our thinking about locating job creators in rural North Carolina. Now, the headquarters are going to want to be in Charlotte, Tier 3 county, Tier 3 being the richest counties that we have in North Carolina. But what if we encourage those that are moving to Charlotte to put their supply chains in Tier 1 and 2 counties? Let's create employment in rural counties, and guess what? The houses actually are where the jobs are. So I think if we think creatively around both zoning and land use regulation, transportation solutions, and the potential solution that we find in our rural counties in North Carolina, I think we can get there. And I hope that it won't take a generation to do that. We could do this if we work together. I'm going to say in 3 years. I don't know what the right number is, but we'll do it more quickly than a generation, I hope.
Senator Newton is exactly right. Let me give you an example of a regulation that we hit that makes no sense. We're putting in a sewer line, and the old way we used to do it was ductile iron. I asked to do PVC. It's the plastic pipe. It's slick. You can get longer links. The municipality said, no, you got to use ductile iron because it's a certain depth. I said, well, why? They said, well, the specs won't come up to where ductile iron is. I said, well, give me the specs. So I got the specs and went to the PVC folks. Their specifications exceeded what ductile iron rust. I've torn them out. The joints are shorter. The PVC is maintenance free. I couldn't do it. That's something that I'm telling businesses, get involved and ask questions. And it's exactly what the Senator's talking about. That's one good thing that we can do it. And why was that? The ductile iron people just had an in with the planners, the city guys, and they thought it was better in their minds. The specs proved otherwise. That's something we need to spend time on.
So you're both small government conservatives, one of you at the federal level, one of you at the state level, and yet you both talked about proactive things that your level of government can do to inspire this building of affordable housing. Talk about that. What is the role? What role should the federal government play, a small, fiscally conservative federal government, play in inspiring and incentivizing this sort of growth?
One thing that I tell people, a lot of groups come out against housing. They don't want any type of housing of any kind. Now, granted, there are people that are already here in a house, but they want to stop everything else because of road congestion. Well, if you look at it, the road congestion is not going, it's, housing adds to it, but that's where you do what you can do to extend the right-of-way, I will gladly put money in infrastructure with roadways, so that you can have great housing. Secondly, a lot of the affordable housing, once they buy it, they can't afford to stay there because of the electricity costs. You got to build sustainable housing. You got to build it so that it appreciates in value. And I will tell you, folks, that's a tough thing today. As the senator said, the last subdivision we did that we put on the ground, 41% was from regulation costs for different parts, and I'm not doing it anymore. So I can't build a product and make any money. Where the government comes in is helping us realize the things like the PVC pipe versus ductile iron. I can tell you 50 others in Rock Hill that we can change and modify in a good way and have the discussion. But you got to have a group of people like y'all took your time to come here today. And everything starts with the conversation. So what I would say is get involved, cut these regulations, and you may need to add some where they make sense. But it's not fair to Mecklenburg County to put a product on the ground that depreciates in value. You've got to have utmost appreciates. As I tell people, to get commercial growth, you got to have people. They don't helicopter them in. So housing is a very important part of commercial growth with pays the taxes. Ask anybody in Charlotte, they will tell you housing eats taxes. It doesn't produce. That's where most of your issues come up. That's the thing we've got to solve, and I need the people in government to help us. And a lot of them do. We've got to be the ones to tell them.
Senator Newton, the Charlotte metro area has a deficit of 34,000 housing units. What role do you play in Raleigh? What role does the state play in solving the city's problems?
Yeah, well, the first thing that's important to know, we're not going to play enabler. So if you have ever been through planning and zoning yourself, if you have a small business, and if you've been through the planning and zoning process, I promise you, and I went through it with a little wedding venue way out in AO, rural Cabarrus County. And this is not an aspersion toward Charlotte-Mecklenburg zoning. I've never been through Charlotte-Mecklenburg zoning. But the stories I could tell you from my experience alone around the costs imposed on a process of a little wedding venue in the middle of nowhere, you can compound that for a builder in an urban environment. The discretion kills you. Time is money. I mean, you're putting your livelihood on the line to try to build something that hopefully someone will buy, and you'll earn a return on that money. I promise you that most folks, my experience was that planning and zoning has no concept of time as money. And they will stop your process because literally they have a suspicion about something that a line of sight to a parking lot. We think people can see your parking lot. Uncontroverted testimony, they cannot. But somebody on his iPad says, I think we can see it. Let's delay this 30 days. You need to go hire an engineer to do a line of sight analysis to make sure people can't see your parking lot in the middle of your hayfield. Unbelievable. It happened, and it happens every day. That is true cost to be imposed. The federal money that we've heard about, so let's call it $50 billion a year in this country is used to subsidize rents and help enable ownership or renting for low-income citizens. That sounds like a good thing, but what happens is most of that money goes to the most burdensome regulatory environments, the cities in the Northeast in particular, that impose the highest regulatory burden on all housing, and yet they're getting the lion's share of the assistance and aid. That doesn't make much sense to me. So again, I believe the predominant root cause is local planning and zoning, and I am happy to partner with our cities in North Carolina, our counties in North Carolina, but I need them to come to us recognizing that they are the biggest part of the solution. But if we can support that, we can help, we can fill in gaps that only the state can do, I am happy to have that conversation, but only after a recognition that we're talking about solving a problem that is a very local problem in the main.
Let me give an example of just what he's talking about. Yesterday I was in a meeting. I'm a big passive solar guy. I think passive solar makes sense. And I think North Carolina's been ahead of South Carolina on offering tax incentives for those who put it in. But the thing the senators talk about, time is money. This guy built a house. He started it back in July of 2019. He had 7 revisions. He had when he put the panels up, and this was net metering. He wasn't trying to sell back to the utility companies anything. It's just for his house. They had there was a lock put, when he tried to operate, there was a lock put on the generation that he was using. We had a meeting yesterday and had the power company there. We said, explain this to us. You got a man here who is having a clean source of energy. You're talking about global warming. This is a perfect example of how to stop that. Clean water, clean power, clean everything, and they were stopping him. We said, why? Hadn't had a return phone call since since September of 2019. They couldn't answer it. I said, guys, you're going to have to either give me an answer, give me a set of specs, or tell me what I'm doing wrong. Come to find out, they said, you're right. They took his lock off yesterday. That should not happen. Now, had he not had the wherewithal to make all the changes, and just what the senator's talking about, time is money. This guy is not, nobody is unlimited, but he just, and I'll never forget this, he started a successful business. He said, the reason I'm here, I started my business because I don't quit, and I'm not going to quit on this. And my motive, I'm getting a long letter today saying, I don't want somebody else to go through that. Passive solar for single-family housing is great, but it's got to be done in the right way. But I will not stand by and let that go, whether it's a single-family residential, an industry, or any kind of commercial business.
All right, let's try to get a few questions in here. Anybody have a question for the gentleman up here? The gentleman up here, we've got a microphone coming. There we go. 1 minute, sir. Right up here at the front table. There we go. There you go.
I don't need a microphone either. But
Well, that's okay. We got a live stream, so.
People say I'm a little loud. Representative Norman, appreciate your comments earlier about the embracing of the community college, the trade programs, and the things that are going on there to help hopefully supplement, I think, and impact the affordability crisis, because our labor shortage is clearly part of that. And that, I mean, to continue to support that, we appreciate that. I also appreciate your support of commercial development and such moving into your state, and some of the great corporate centers that have started up businesses down there right across our state line from Charlotte. Probably we're in competition for Charlotte. My concern or my question today is, how are you counseling some of the local municipalities and counties in your district who are acting egregious impact fees and such, which I know are a direct assault on affordability of housing? And I'm sure you've got some good thoughts, because you know how important it is. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been against impact taxes. They call it impact fee, but it's an impact tax that's being passed on to the consumer. And I know the 48% of, I assume, North Carolina's budget goes to public education, around 49% in South Carolina. So I understand supporting the schools, but until they offer consolidation, you got some schools sitting vacant that fully staffed with 10 students per teacher, as opposed to 28 in Fort Mill and in different areas, I'm sure, in Charlotte. But no, I think we just got to have a meeting just like we're doing today and say we want quality growth, we want commercial growth which pays the taxes, so that our residents that we put here can shop. And we've got to encourage vertical construction, and we've got to have, developers should not get by with a lot of it's happening now with just building a cheaper structure and passing something on that the people can't afford anyway. I mean, I've seen the construction, 24 inches on center, the studs. I mean, it's the cheapest material. The maintenance cost of this is going to be unbelievable. And as a result, you, the taxpayers in Mecklenburg County, are going to pay, because guess what that house is going to do? It's going to decrease in value rather than going up. And so we just got to, I guess, I've got to get the businesses actively involved. The fact that they tell me, I'm not in politics, I tell people now, everybody's in politics. And when they say no, I said, have you ever seen the top of a paycheck and the bottom? Is it the same? No. You have deductions, and that's politics. You can call it whatever you want. But it's your net is what you take home is getting less and less. And that's actually why I'm in this, because there's some common sense that needs to be done. Great planning, roads need to be smartly developed, as well as housing, and it's common sense isn't so common anymore, to be honest with you. Not in Washington.
Senator, you want to add anything?
I know, it was a great answer.
Great. We got time for one quick one, if anybody's got one more. Over here. This gentleman on the side.
Good morning, gentlemen. Could you, each of you, share your thoughts about how we address the problem of NIMBYism? Thank you.
So
Excellent on the quick one.
I'll start if
Great,
you'd like
please.
to. But yeah, so that is a big issue. And I think part of that is sort of persuasion, convincing people that, you know, it's a societal benefit to go with YIMBYism instead of NIMBYism, YIMBYism being yes in my backyard. But part of that's planning and zoning, right? The mother-in-law suite, so to speak, and allowing things that haven't been allowed in the past. And that's literally in someone's backyard that wants it. But I think I think you've got to convince people it's in the greater good to not oppose that. But I will say that to say there is a important part of the process, which is due process. And when you're changing someone's zoning, they have a due process right, which they exercise to be heard. So you hear those comments, but then the government, local government, will make its decision. But every private property owner gets to participate in the rezoning process, and I think that's important. Let's don't leave private property rights behind.
I agree with the senator. The only thing I would add to that is, not in my backyard is not a bad thing. You meet with the people and say, what's your concern? And I've got got a group now that's been opposing housing forever. They want us to do a hotel. I said, I can't, because of the tax benefits. Keeps their taxes lower as homeowners. I said, now, if you're going to keep opposing housing, no, it's this demographics, the number of people within a 1, 5, 3, and 5 mile radius. That's how a hotel makes sense. But you address it one at a time and not ignore them. And you do come to a point in time where, like in the private sector, you say, we just have a difference of opinion. And I'm either going to move forward and you try to stop it, and if you do, fine. But you have the discussion, and hopefully, like the senator says, you convince them the greater good. And I've learned so much in meeting with groups like that, because they're your strength of this whole country, to be honest with you, our people.
All right, Senator Newton, Congressman Norman, thank you both so much for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.